Behind every success story, there is a long line of triumphs and defeats that remain hidden from others. These stories get condensed into journeys that minimize the struggle and wrap up with a happy ending. But we know that's not how life works. That's where From the Ashes with Mark Azoulay comes in. On today's show, you'll hear honest conversations about the challenges that Mark's guest faced and how they overcame adversity. Now, here is your host, Mark Azoulay.
Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Mark Azoulay. And I'm sitting here with Janet Schmit. She's the creator of Reprogram for Success and is a quantum conscious integration specialist. I'm really excited to have you on the show, Janet. We were talking a little bit before we went live just about how you really blend spirituality with coaching, with science, neuroscience, and psychology. You sound like a really interesting person. I can't wait to get to meet you more.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I'm always excited to talk about what I'm passionate about.
Yeah, and it's cool, right? We were talking like I went to Naropa growing up, in grad school, and this stuff is becoming more and more mainstream. So I'm curious, before we dive into what is that you do, I'm curious about who you are. Like, what brought you to this field? How did you start to learn more of these kind of esoteric ways of being and holistic treatments?
Well, I think we all have it naturally inside us. And I'm going to start with that. But when I was 4, my grandfather basically died in front of me. And when he died, I saw angels, and I saw him with angels, and I couldn't figure out why everybody was crying because he was happy. Because as a kid, I was taught, oh, we go to heaven and everything's good, right? And so I kind of went on with that. I didn't talk about it that much. And then I grew up in Wyoming for part of my life. And so I would go out into the fields, and there'd be just these horses running around, and I just put my hands out and put love because I loved them so much. And they just come up to me. Now, these weren't my horses, but they'd come up, and I didn't realize I was doing the laying of hands. So I've always kind of been interested in this. And my father was a minister, so I would ask him different questions about, like, if he believed that, you know, spirits came and walked the earth, or I would have all these different questions. None of my siblings were asking these questions, but I was. And so that was one. And then I went into the mainstream of life, and I, went to college, got married, had kids, worked. And then something started happening. I went through a divorce when my youngest child was 8, and I found myself on my knees, thinking, what's happening? And I was looking out, and all of a sudden, these 3 translucent figures, Moses, Jesus, and Elijah, walked into me, and all the angels came back. And I thought, okay, what's happening? So this goes into quantum physics because we say everything's energy, right? So I'm thinking, wow, this is pretty cool. So I started studying Reiki. I became a Reiki master. Meanwhile, I'm still chairman of the board of a nonprofit that helps homeless women get a better education. And I'm also helping a inner city hospital raise funds. And I'm treating people with Reiki, because I'm a Reiki master. So after a while, I ended up getting a large sum of money in the divorce. And now I could help the underserved, right? Both individual and nonprofit alike. I'm thinking this is great. And then all of a sudden, everybody attached to me for my money. And I couldn't say no. And my financial advisor, I found myself in arbitration. My financial advisor, who was with a well-known international firm, which is still international, still around today, made an investment outside the scope of the firm and lost millions, actually.
Oh.
And so here I am thinking I'm going to lose this money. So that's the quantum physics part, the energy that I'm putting out with my thoughts, my energy, everything. And I knew I wasn't going to lose. And in the end, the financial advisor was disbarred. His partner fine, the company was fine, but sure enough, I only got 10% of what I lost. So now I'm sitting there going, okay, this has to be deeper than quantum, than energy or us putting energy out there. And so I started studying epigenetics. I started studying anything that I could that was connected, like NLP,
Yeah, can you define those for listeners just in case they need to know?
Neuro-linguistic programming. I started studying neuro-linguistic programming, theta healing, psyche, EMI, eye movement integration, hypnotherapy. I just opened the door to everything, even DNA re-engineering. I just went down the road because I knew there had to be something more. And sure enough, I came from 8 generations of ministers who signed up to be economically challenged, who signed up to give their last cents to the underserved, and who had never had any money to manage. Now, I don't want to take that away from them because that's very honorable. That's what they wanted for their life. But it made me understand my own money consciousness. This is inherited. This is imprinted in your genes. And so it took me down that whole rabbit hole. And so I had to figure out, how do you change that? How do you remove a belief or take as a self-limiting belief and make it into a self-enhancing one? And so that's why I began to study everything I could. And I probably corrected 200 things on myself. and I'm always, everybody's a work in progress, right? And I came up with reprogramming for success and quantum consciousness integration, because these are a combination of techniques that can literally change self-limiting beliefs into self-enhancing ones. And one of the techniques I use, if anybody knows who Dr. Bruce Lipton is, he wrote The Biology of Belief, which was a bestseller 20 years ago. And he writes in the back of that book that Psyche is the fastest, most efficient way to change a self-limiting belief into a self-enhancing one. And that's why he was able to finish the book. And that's why he has great relationships today. And so I had found a combination of techniques that actually work in reprogramming ourselves for the success that we desire, or even stopping smoking. It goes down the line. Anything you want to change, you can change.
Yeah. So I know you talked about the money self-limiting belief. I'm interested in that. But can you tell me also, what are some of the beliefs that you had to reprogram and what that process was like for you personally?
Oh, fear was a big one.
Yeah.
I mean, fear is a big one for everybody, fear of lack, fear of everything. But I was fearful of everything. Everything. My mother worried about 99.9% of everything that was never going to happen. My dad used to say that, and it's inherited, and it was in my gene. Now, in our genes, we can turn these emotions or these feelings or these traits on or off. And I had turned it on full blast. And so I was like, one day I and this was before I even had come up with the combination of techniques. I just was like, I have to change this. So what I did was I went through a method of putting the word fear, in an imaginary bubble and attaching it to me. And every time I felt fearful, I cut it away and put safety, security, and confidence in its place. I did this for 1 week. And after 1 week, I had a situation where I would have been really, really fearful. And instead I wasn't. And I basically watched 2 realities slow motion separate. And I was walking a whole different path. And that's what happens when we change a massive belief, a belief that's so ingrained in us. We literally change the trajectory of our lives, both professionally and personally. And that's what happened to me. That day was probably one of the biggest life-changing days of my life. And so I've done abandonment. I've had abandonment issues. I've had extreme, lack. Even down to lack of love, lack of self-esteem. I mean, I had it all. It was all packed in me, and I just went down systematically. What it does take, and this is what I will tell the listeners, you have to be a student of your life, or a scientist, and go into that laboratory and know that it's limitless. Don't limit yourself, but you really have to be honest. And sometimes it's really painful. I mean, I had a conversation with my son. I kept having this conversation repeat, right? Where you're rubbing. I call it rubbing, where you're kind of not getting along on the conversation. I thought, what is this feeling? And instead of blaming him, I look at me. And this is where people have the problem. They want to blame somebody else. They don't want to look at themselves. And so the first thing I do if I have a feeling is I look at me and I take myself down. Where did this come from? Why do I feel this way? What is this feeling? And it was abandonment. Well, I was abandoned as a child. I was abandoned twice as an adult. And so I was like, oh, this is the feeling that I have. But wait, he's only growing up. he's not abandoning me. He's just growing up. He's just going and living his life. I'm still part of his life, but he's growing up. And so it was easy for me to correct that. But it helps you go through and clear, I call it your timeline, your past, all your past hurts, all your past emotions that don't serve you, everything that doesn't serve you from your past, you can literally clear out of your timeline so that when you go from now and into the future, your trajectory can change.
Yeah. Yeah. Say more about the not taking it personally, because I think that is such a critical part, right?
Yeah, it's really hard for us as humans to even criticism. That was a big one for me because as a kid, I felt criticized a lot. And so I took it personally and I changed it to it's only somebody's opinion. I mean, and I think our society builds us into that, right? We always want to think the negative because even the news, everything says, hang on to the negative. And the positive, it feels so great, but the negative hurts so deep that we have a harder time letting go. So that's why it's easier to blame somebody else than yourself, taking responsibility for, one of the reasons why when I look at my inherited money consciousness, I may say my ancestors didn't have any money to manage, but I was given that money to manage. So it was my ignorance at that point. So I had to look at myself of why I lost the money. And that was pretty tough when I got to that point.
Yeah, I think it's tough. And I think it's also really courageous to take that kind of brutal, objective, microscope, right? And examine everything. Like you said, all the way down from what is objectively happening, all the way down to feelings and past traumas and triggers and all that. And
yeah.
Drill as deep as you can.
That's why I'm saying it can be painful. Yeah. And some of it can be really joyous because once you actually change it, it's like, wow, I can't believe I hung on to that for so long. It's like hanging on to big hurts from the past. Why? You're living now. You're living now. They give you the knowledge, but seriously, you're living now.
Yeah. So I want to go back to the quantum mechanics piece, and you talk about these, crossroads moments. And please let me know, because my understanding is probably not as deep as yours, but does that feel like a multiversal moment or something, right? Where you kind of enter into a new consciousness or you change the path or jump reality or something like that? How would you describe those moments?
That's what I would say. I would say it was, I believe we live in parallel universes. And for me, especially that fear moment, it was literally, I could have seen what would have happened had I gone this way. Literally, it was like slow motion. Watching it. And there's another person that talks about this. I've only heard one other person really describe it the way I am, and that's Brian Scott. But it is like literally watching something in slow motion and seeing you go this way and seeing this other thing go that way. And I do believe that when we change something as a belief so drastically, like as an opposite even, then you can't help but quantum jump. And people need to understand you're still going to see your, the outside look somewhat the same, but you'll notice that different things happen to you differently now. Now you're welcoming opportunities that normally wouldn't come to you because I was fearful, but I'm not now. So I'm welcoming more opportunities to me in that respect, or once you let go of abandonment or any of that, you're welcoming more relationships in. And so it can't help but put you on another, what I call a parallel reality, and it doesn't mean, as you said, or another level of consciousness if you want to even go to the fifth dimension or fourth dimension or whatever they're talking about. It elevates you to that. And when you start elevating to that, and this is just something for people to know, once you start changing your belief systems, your traits, then you will notice that situations change. You will notice that your friends change because they're not at your frequency. And that doesn't make them bad or good. And it doesn't make you good or bad. It's just is. And it's just where you want to go. So if you want to elevate in your feelings and not have the negative feelings, then you're going to elevate above that. The pendulum, as I call it, you're going to elevate above that. And then you're going to be attracting people in that realm. and other people may fall away, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I experienced that most profoundly when I was in recovery from, drugs and alcohol, right? But this idea of changing these deep traumas and these deep triggers, it does change your perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in that, it changes reality because, like you said, I mean, the way that I view, which is a little different, but I think there's enough overlap of, the world is chaotic. There's a ton of stuff happening all the time. We can't filter it effectively, but if we can change our filter, we can start to see a different reality. And like you said, notice things that we might not have noticed, have conversations that we never would have had, meet people that we wouldn't have met. My belief is that those people were there the whole time, but because we're stuck in like our own little bubble, we weren't able to even see them, like literally not even perceive those opportunities and those connections,
Correct. Yeah. That's very well said. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it can be really powerful to go all the way down. So I want to start this question now. We might move into the commercial break in a couple minutes here, but I am curious about the spiritual beliefs, right? You talk about, seeing the biblical figures. You talked about channeling a little bit before when we were chatting. What role does that play? And how do you use that in your life? How do you integrate that into your personal life, professional life, and wherever?
Well, when I started really kind of going down this kind of what I call the rabbit hole, but when I started going down, quantum physics and epigenetics and really studying it, I had different things happen to me that were trying to wake me up. One was I levitated off of a table.
Really?
Yeah, I went to see this Reiki master, and I levitated off the table, and I came down. When I came to, I was off the table, and I was surprised. And she goes, "Can I ask where you were?" And I said, "Oh, I was 4 years old, and I was on this golden escalator, and I was going up the escalator, and at the top of the escalator there was a field of flowers, and there was Jesus, and he made me laugh so much. I felt so much love, and I was laughing so much. I came down the escalator, and I wanted to feel it one more time, that feeling of love and laughter. I went back up, I felt it again, and I came down. And then when I came to, I had levitated. So that was one sign to me, like,
wow.
You need to start paying attention. We're giving you signs of what you're meant for, right?
Yep.
And then another time I had a Reiki master ask me, she was a student, she asked if she could work on me. And I said, sure. So she worked on me. And after she worked on me, she left the room. I didn't realize she was gone. But all of a sudden, these white robes were all along the side of me. And they were all coming and touching my forehead as they went, like my third eye, as they went by. And I'm like, okay. And I didn't know who to talk to about this. I'm just like, this is all happening to me. So so I started having these different things happen to me. And then one day I thought, I'm just going to write down, what is it that Janet needs to know today? And I did. And all of a sudden it started flowing through my hands of what. And I'm going to preface this. I did make the commitment that I would only channel or only talk about entities that were, or individuals, or whatever we want to call them, that were of the frequency of Jesus Christ or higher. And I'm not making it religion, but for me, everything, people see things as equated to how they were raised, right? And because I think every religion has validity. I don't. I have many different guides, as I call. Buddha is one of my guides. So Buddha is one that comes forth and talks to me. So, and so I started just practicing that, and it went on from there. And it's been a part of my practice now. Before somebody comes and sees me, I'll say, "What is it that Mark needs to know today?" And sometimes I do it before podcasts, and they'll be right on. Sometimes I call it the Galactic Angelic Council that talks to me. Sometimes it's just a few that come. I had a CEO, and Mary came forward for her. And so Mary had a message. And so, and she wasn't even Catholic, this woman. So it just depends. And
that's interesting. We got to move to our commercial break. We'll pick this back up on the other side, because I'm interested about how you integrate that into your life. So for those listening, hang on in there, and we'll see you on the other side of the commercial break.
Voice America is on LinkedIn. Connect with us today.
In Mark's work with high performers and business owners, it is becoming increasingly clear to him that their biggest obstacle to success is themselves. They are experts in their field, but are dragged down by their anxiety, poor time management, inability to focus, or self-sabotage. His role is to help you overcome these emotional and organizational issues so that you can truly excel in your business and your personal life. One of the most common hurdles that he sees is perfectionism, a crippling anxiety around performance. It's a fear of not being good enough, being publicly embarrassed, or of disappointing others. These fears paralyze brilliant people and bring them to their knees. This course will help you to break free from this mental prison and have more agency in your world. In this online course, we will break down the prison of perfectionism so that you can break out of it. For more information and to sign up, visit mark-azulay.teachable.com. That's Mark, MARC-Azulay, AZOULAY.teachable.com.
It's your world. Motivate, change, succeed. VoiceAmericaEmpowerment.com.
You are listening to From the Ashes with Mark Azulay. To reach the show today, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. Or send an email to podcast@mark-azulay.com. Now, back to From the Ashes.
Welcome back to the show. I'm sitting here with Janet Schmit, the creator of Reprogram for Success. And I actually want to ask you about that, right? How are people programmed? What does that mean to you? I've talked about the kind of genetic programming and cultural programming, but can you expand on that a little bit for our listeners?
Well, programming, a good way that you can really see a program is if you see the person do the same thing over and over again. So if they're dating the same, I always use this as an example because everybody gets it. If they're dating the same person over and over again and the same thing happens, yeah. It's not with the other person, it's with you. You're choosing the same person and so that the same thing happens. So you have to go back to yourself. And so that's a good way to say, or I always love it when somebody says, oh, you're doing that just like your dad. And then you go, no, I'm not. And then you stop. If you stop, yeah, you are. It's a trait that's ingrained in us. People have to understand that by the time you're 7 years old, you've watched your parents, you've watched everyone around you, what they do, what they think, their emotions, their traits, actions. You're in theta state, so you're like a sponge and you don't argue with it most of the time. You just accept it as is. And so those are the bulk of your traits. And the other thing that I find that people really have ingrained in them that affects their programming is big hurts. And, we don't think of if a child is young and somebody says, that's terrible artwork, or that's not good artwork, or you're stupid or something. People don't think that has an effect, but that can be a major, major hurdle for somebody or hurt. And so off of that, they get a trait or defensive, or they don't like criticism. They get hurt when anybody criticizes them, or they take it personally. They take everything personally. And so we develop these programs. It's just like I said with the inherited money. That's a program I had running, and I had no clue that. So I tell people, oh, really? How do you look at money? Let's look. Are you afraid of money? Are you afraid of not having money? What is it? Because I guarantee you that's a pattern somewhere that you've heard people talk about. I mean, my mom used to say that if we only just had enough, and would say that wealthy people weren't really that nice of people, or money was the root of all evil. It changed people. And these are things that, my mom was programmed too. So you have to understand. And so I would say to people, I'm not saying this stuff so that you go blame your parents. they're programmed too.
Yeah.
Saying this so that you can deprogram what's not working for you. And the importance of that, and I want to get this in this program, the importance for that is it not only affects your life, but if you have children, it affects your children because they're part of your DNA. So when you switch it off on yours, you're switching it off on them because they're also part of your holographic field and your quantum field. And that's a really important thing. And this also is with anybody that's connected to you, that they will be affected by any change that you make. So I'm not saying it to blame your parents. I'm explaining where a lot of your, programming comes from.
Yeah, and it's something that's unconscious, right? I mean, that's psychoanalysis, and they would call that unconscious conditioning. But I think it's two words for the same thing.
Yeah,
we get conditioned and trained, just like, if you ever get a abused animal, you adopt an abused animal, right? They might be afraid of boots or afraid of like weird noises or, certain types of people. It's like, oh yeah, my animal doesn't like men or whatever it is, right? All that stuff is just deeply coded. And I mean, humans have the same thing, right? Like we have those same things in us that make our personality, but also make some pretty limiting beliefs oftentimes. And the money one's a great example. I think that happens all the time for people.
All the time. And I'd also say to people, think of what you have such a strong belief about, whatever you believe really, really strongly about. Sit down and say, where did that come from? Did that come from society, my parents, something catastrophic? Where did it come from? And then ask yourself, set yourself aside and say, is it my belief? Because it can still be your belief. I'm not saying it's not, but you have to ask yourself and be really honest. Is that your belief? And for me, when it came to inherited money consciousness, that wasn't my belief.
Yeah. Do you have a sense that goes back in spirituality of like what we are at our core? Right. And I think of this as you're talking, Buddhism would state that there isn't really anything there, right? Like where it's all kind of all conditioning. It's all, repetitions. It's like if you strip it all down, we're kind of just, the words are just like open, compassionate, aware, and present, right? Like it's very just pure presence, right? Pure attention.
You know what? I would agree with that. I believe that at our core, at our essence, at our full essence of who we are, I think we're pure. I think we come in and that's when all the programming, and I believe in many lives though, too. So for me, but I do believe whether you believe in many lives or whether you don't, we're pure beings when we're born, right? And it is the conditioning that we endure from that moment on in that can turn on if we want to go scientifically, can turn on or off the gene. And so, but I do believe that we are a pure form, a pure form. I mean, we were made in God's image, so how can we not be in pure form? And then we came down to earth, and we were given choices, and
you kind of stack all the delusion on top of it, and then you got your personality, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think the issue is, and this is nothing. I mean, there's no way to change this, but a lot of it's out of our control, right? Like you said, a lot of it is either passed down genetically, or through culture, or through society, and then we have to go back and change those things.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about. It's that's why I never changed assisting the underserved. For me, that was part of my ancestors that I really liked, was helping the underserved. So I still have that, but I changed a lot of the other stuff. And so I would say to people, that's why I say, do a tally and see what's working, what's not working in your life. What do you want to achieve? I guarantee you, if there's something that you really want to achieve in your life and you've been working towards trying to achieve it, it's best to go in your timeline and find out where that block is. Because we all have a timeline from our past, and we can go through that past and find out where that block is.
Yeah, let's talk a little more about that. I think especially as it applies when you're talking, I'm thinking about business owners or entrepreneurs, right? Someone that has like a very clear goal. And they're writing it down like, I want this, right? I want more success. I want to have this impact in the world. I want to move this product, whatever it is. But they find themselves just stuck in a lot of ways. Maybe they're procrastinating. Maybe they're having anxiety attacks. Maybe they feel overwhelmed and confused. So one part of their brain is saying like, this is all I've ever wanted. And one part of their brain is saying like, absolutely not.
Well, the first thing is I would never say I want, I have, I am. Because when you say I want, or I will be, you're pushing it off into the future. So you're telling your subconscious mind, because now we're getting into the subconscious mind. You're telling your subconscious mind, oh, we can do that later. But if you say I have, and you feel it's already there, you embody that feeling of being that person. Well, now you're starting to change the subconscious mind. But there, when you have a goal or you want to achieve something, you have to be really honest with yourself, because I could test you. You could tell me that you were an abundant person, right? Or you could say, I have an abundant mindset. I could test your subconscious mind and find out if it's true or not. So we can believe something, we can tell ourselves something, but does our subconscious mind really believe it? And that's what I tell all my entrepreneurs. Whatever you're doing, does your subconscious mind really believe that? Because your subconscious mind runs 95% of everything. It's on autopilot. It's like when we drive down the street and we're like, how did I get here? Well, because you're on autopilot. It's been driving it so many times. It's the same thing with our thought process. Your subconscious will never lie. So you can ask it a question and it will not lie. It will tell the truth. So you could somebody can tell me I have an abundant mindset. I say, okay, let's test that. And then if they test weak, then we instill it in so that it is a goal balance or a belief. And so
How do you go about testing that? How do you dialogue with the subconscious?
Well, you can muscle test very easily. Muscle testing is a proven fact that your body does not lie. It will not lie to you. And there's other ways to even go through it. And I take people up through their timeline, and we can look through their timeline or their past, and you literally can see where there's blocks when you're up above. When you're above your timeline, you'll see it. If you can calm yourself, you'll see where there are blocks. And then you go through the process of taking out those blocks so that that timeline runs smoothly all the way through.
Right. Yeah, you can see those moments where trauma hit, or where you got frozen, or you got scared, or whatever it was. Yeah.
You can see whatever it is. I mean, a lot of times, some people, I'll start off with fear. We'll look at fear in their life, and we'll take it out. We'll see where it's all blocked in their timeline, take it out, and then we'll instill safety, security, and confidence in its place, reprogram, reorganize, right? Rejuvenate. And then I follow it up with Psyche, where you really clamp it down. And I mean, I've used these techniques, and when they're used together, sometimes people's voice during the session changes an octave because it's locked in. It's pretty amazing.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, can you say something about these techniques? Like Psyche, what is that? How does that work? Where do you learn that?
Psyche was invented about 30 years ago by Rob Williams. And he knew that you had to be in the whole brain state. So it's something that takes you into the whole brain state. It's crosses your left cortex with your right cortex and brings you into a whole brain state on the new belief. So you can test yourself by muscle testing, or there's also techniques to cross your left cortex with your right cortex so that it's now open to accept the new belief. We also have 12 core belief systems in our body. He had discovered all these different techniques where you can even take yourself through your birthing process all the way to your death so that you're no longer fearful of any of it. And all of it's by crossing your left cortex with your right cortex. And so basically I test somebody. And so if you wanted I have an abundant mindset, or I am filled with abundance, right? We would go through, and if it was weak, I would say, okay, let's do this. And I test which side is the weaker. Is it your logical side, or is it your creative side? And then we have a system of crossing you over and bringing you into a whole brain state on the new belief. And once it's in, it's in. And it's locked in. And so he had come up with that. EMI, or eye movement integration, which is like EMDR, that also crosses your left cortex with your right cortex and brings you into a whole brain state of healing, which is really magical. I use that also, and it is really healing. Theta healing uses a timeline, and it also is about epigenetics. And I use that with people who are used to meditating because it's easier for them to get into the state. And near-linguistic programming, it's been around for a while. It deals with your language, how we take it in, how we process everything in our minds, our subconscious mind, and how we communicate. And it really takes people through a whole more expansive way. So I use those combinations. I use DNA re-engineering, light code activation, which basically takes somebody towards this light that actually they shed everything that doesn't serve them. So it's kind of a beautiful thing to use too. So I just use whatever's meant for the person who comes in front of me.
Yeah, whatever tool you have in the toolbox, right? That can work with their psyche.
Yeah, I find that whatever they're meant to absorb, whatever they're meant to take, that's what I just naturally comes out of me for the person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds, there's like an intuitive piece of how you work too.
Yes. I'm very fortunate that way. I feel like it's a gift. Mm-hmm. It's a gift. It's kind of like channeling before I even see somebody, whether they're a linear person and I'm never going to read it to them, or whether it's somebody who wants to hear it. It always gives me a viewpoint, and I channel from the Galactic Angelic Council. And so they really do have a beautiful message for the person. And somehow I interweave it for if that's a word, for the linear people, and for the people who want to hear it, I just read it. They're just amazed. And they know that it's already written on the paper when they're sitting there, because I haven't written anything.
Right. Yeah. So there's like a big reveal moment.
It is like a big reveal.
Yeah. And we're going to move into our final commercial break. When we get back, we'll talk directly to you, the listener. Walk you through some techniques that you can do right now while you're sitting at home listening, and things that can help to either identify or kind of destroy some of these self-limiting beliefs. See you on the other side of the commercial break.
Follow Voice America at facebook.com/Voice America for juicy updates from your favorite radio shows and podcasts.
In Mark's work with high performers and business owners, it is becoming increasingly clear to him that their biggest obstacle to success is themselves. They are experts in their field, but are dragged down by their anxiety, poor time management, inability to focus, or self-sabotage. His role is to help you overcome these emotional and organizational issues so that you can truly excel in your business and your personal life. One of the most common hurdles that he sees is perfectionism, a crippling anxiety around performance. It's a fear of not being good enough, being publicly embarrassed, or of disappointing others. These fears paralyze brilliant people and bring them to their knees. This course will help you to break free from this mental prison and have more agency in your world. In this online course, we will break down the prison of perfectionism so that you can break out of it. For more information and to sign up, visit mark-azulay.teachable.com. That's Mark, MARC-Azulay, AZOULAY.teachable.com.
It's your world. Motivate, change, succeed. VoiceAmericaEmpowerment.com.
You are listening to From the Ashes with Mark Azulay. To reach the show today, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. Or send an email to podcast@mark-azulay.com. Now, back to From the Ashes.
Welcome back to the show. In this final segment, we talk directly to you, the listener. So Janet has some great tools and techniques to share with you. Janet, take it away. We were talking a little bit over the break, what you want to share.
I'd like to share with everyone. Now, if you're driving, please don't close your eyes. You can listen to this, but don't close your eyes. But I usually give my entrepreneurs and CEOs what is called the 1 point. It was used by the samurais prior to going into battle. And what it does is it takes all your emotions and all your thoughts. See, they believe that if they kept all those emotions, the samurais thought, if they kept all the emotions and thoughts up in their head, they would be top heavy and easier to knock off their horses. So they came up with a system of how they could flow their thoughts and emotions down to 2 inches below their navel, which is called the hara point, and then flow it down their legs to the ground, to the center of the earth. So I'm going to take you through this because what it will do for you is if you find yourself in a meeting where you're not thinking clearly or your emotions aren't settled, or you're even going to meet friends or you're going to see your family after work, you can really use this to bring you down, to be present, to clear out everything. All right. So now I'm going to ask everybody to take a deep breath in. And as you exhale, close down your eyes. And now see all these thoughts, feel all the thoughts and emotions. Some of you will even see them, and just see everything and feel everything all gathered together in your mind, in your brain, in your head. And now we're going to flow them down, down, down to 2 inches below your navel, down. Just feel them flow down. And now let them flow down. And from the point, 2 inches below your navel, see them all flow there. And there's a bright light. And from that bright light, everything's flowing down with that bright light down your legs, all the way down your legs, to the ground, to the center of the earth. And just feel all of that just flow all the way down to the ground, to the center of the earth. And now you can open your eyes.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, I did it along with you and I feel clearer. Definitely. And I think if I was in a state of being jumbled, it would be great to just ground down and just root into the earth and root into where I'm at.
Yeah, I tell everybody you can go into the bathroom stall and do that, do that very quickly. I mean, if you feel that everything's just feels vibrationally unsettled, or the conversations that are going on aren't hitting you right, just excuse yourself and do this 90-second, I call it an emotional resilience tool or an emotional reset.
Mm-hmm.
And it works.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. That's really great. I think that's really useful and just, it's easy, right? Like it's easy. You can integrate it into your life. It's like great to do. So wrapping up here, I'd love to talk about case studies, right? And ask you how you'd work with certain people. So I'm curious, I guess kind of on that, how would you work with somebody that is chaotic, scattered, right? Has trouble organizing themselves, has trouble, arriving to things on time, really feels like their life is maybe always in a rush. I'm sure you know people like this, right? That there's kind of like very, very high energy individuals.
Well, the first thing we do is we'd go through it. I listen to them talk. So just in what you've said tells me that there's a little bit issue with self-esteem. Mm-hmm. So we go down and correct that first, right? Because being on time is all about your own self-esteem. So we'd go down and correct that. But there's so many other ways that we can go down. But if we're going to talk about case studies, I'm going to bring up one woman that I had that she is a CEO. She's a big executive, and she came to me during COVID, and somebody had referred her to me. And she had all these ailments. Like she even had mold. She wouldn't put any nail polish on her nails because she was afraid of the toxins. She was like afraid of everything. She stopped basically even eating anything. It was crazy how far she had taken it. Mm-hmm. And so by the time she got to me, and she was so fearful, and so I took her down the process that I used. And she wrote me a really sweet review, which it will give people an idea of what happened. She was going to doctor to figure out how she could cure. She had mold, actually. Mold disease or something like that. And she had gone to doctor. She'd gone for her anxiety. She had gone to get, she was on supplements. She was going to see therapists, everybody. And after 2 sessions, we had gotten her anxiety down. We had gotten everything moving out. And she wrote in my review, even after 8 sessions, she was good to go. And she said, it might be unconventional. It might be a little bit off the beaten path, some of the things I do. But she said, now she's good to go. And the only time that she connects with me is like, she goes, there's a rare moment where I might have to call her. But other than that, so
Solid. Yeah.
Yeah, she's solid. And so that's one. I do work with business teams because everybody has a different epigenetic background, but we might have the same goal focus. So I have a business team understand what epigenetics are, how we all have different backgrounds, because that also gives them, if they have that knowledge, it gives them the emotional intelligence to create the strategy needed, right? But we create goal balances together, or new beliefs about what we're going to do. And I had one of my first clients was a real estate company, and they all thought this one building was a monstrosity. They couldn't move it for anything, and everything was selling, so they should have been able to move it, right? And well, when everybody's subconscious mind says it's a monstrosity, it's not going to sell. It's been labeled. And so we went through that and we did some goal balance. They sold it in 3 days and they became the #1 group because that's what they wanted. And so what I do is I check to see if everybody believes, if their subconscious believes it. If it's weak or strong, I get them all strong on the goal and then they go. And so we don't have to change all the epigenetic background. We can just change what's affecting the business team or the company. And that's been extremely successful.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think it just creates better morale, right? And kind of, to use quantum word, kind of like a unified field, right? Like where people are all pointed at the same thing. And I think that does really make change, right? Like I said, if everyone thinks this building's not going to sell, when they're pitching it to, an investor or a buyer, they're going to be lower energy. They're going to be bummed out about it. They're going to like maybe say something like, oh, well, no one else wants, like they might just like sneak in some negativity that perpetuates these cycles. Right. Exactly.
And that's why just changing just the goal balances, just the goals of what they want to achieve, that belief part, they're called goal balances in Psyche. But if we just want to change that belief part, but you don't have to change everything else, then it's magic almost. It's beautiful how it works.
That's great. Yeah.
And it's fun. It's fun for me to see. It's fun for me to see in the clients when I'm working with them to actually see everything just start to click, and you can see it, and it's beautiful. I mean, some people's voices change an octave. Different things happen, but it's an honor and a privilege actually to assist people.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Janet, like what's next for you? Do you think you'll have your own modality? Do you think you'll write? Like, where do you see this going?
Oh, well, I am writing a book called Voice Consciousness Unedited.
Okay, cool.
And it's kind of like how I got where I am, but also it explains a lot more. It's kind of a handbook for people. It's kind of like I went down the rabbit hole of so many different techniques and different things, and I even do quantum painting, which I would say to people: numbers have frequency. You put them on a canvas, you paint over them with paint, and you take in that frequency as the viewer. So if you use abundance codes, you're going to take it in. So I test everything. I tested that; it works. I tested it on a client. I had done 3 paintings. I asked her what each painting was. She was right on the money each time. Although the abundance one, she said, that looks like the abundance vortex at Mount Shasta. And I was like, how did you get that? I don't know. She did. So it's kind of off of that. And I don't know, just keep doing what I'm doing because I enjoy it. I really enjoy changing the business groups. To me, it changes how we work together. It changes how we view each other. And that's really important at this time that we're going through.
Yeah, I think now is the time. I mean, there's so, especially post-pandemic, right? Like people are questioning everything about business, about the social aspect specifically, right? Like, why does work have to suck, right? Or, what's a toxic workplace? What's a supportive workplace? Like that stuff is really being talked about in a really good way.
In a good way. Yeah.
It's great to get that you can be a part of that kind of real impact, right? People spend so much time at work, it needs to be a place that's supportive.
It needs to be, and it needs to be a place of understanding, and it needs to be a place of acceptance. And that's when you really have magic and you can really move forward. And so that's probably my path, and sharing my information like with you and everyone listening. Right. It's really important to me.
Yeah. Well, so as we're wrapping up here, is there something that you'd like to say to listeners? Maybe a message or a sentiment or something?
Yeah, I'll say to you, success, there's 2 things. Success in every area of your life is real and achievable, but the power is in your hands. The power is always in our hands. And I think Tao said something to the point that the biggest gift you can give is your own self-transformation. And the reason why is because when we start changing ourselves, when we start going after our desires, when we start changing who we are, we change everybody around us too. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, Janet, thanks so much for being on the show. If you want to learn more about you and about what you do, where could they find you online?
You can find me at janetelainschmit.com. That's my website. I also am the same thing, Janet Elaine Schmit, at Instagram and LinkedIn too. But my website is where you'll find most. And I'm sure, I believe on there you can possibly get, if you write for it, you can probably get a 15-minute, for the first 25 people, you'll get a free 15-minute, assessment where we can talk. You can see if I work for you. If I don't, that's fine. And you'll find somebody who does. I'm all about the frequency. You got to have the right person.
Got to have the vibe. Well, thanks so much for being on the show. If you're listening, I appreciate you tuning in. If you find this information valuable or helpful, please share it with somebody. Give us a 5-star Apple review. And we'll see you next week, another episode of From the Ashes.
Thank you for joining host Mark Azoulay on From the Ashes. Be sure to tune in again live next Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time and 11 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel, or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Meet triumph and defeat and treat those 2 imposters the same.